So when it comes to manifestation techniques, not all of them are created equal. And in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you the frameworks, the proprietary IP that I've cultivated, that I've experimented with, that I have proven frameworks, right? That have taken my life to quantum leaps, to levels that I would never have imagined, as well as my clients. And I'm going to share with you how everything fits together so it finally makes sense for you. So you're finally like, oh, that's why people talk about identity shifting, and that's why some people talk about beliefs, and that's why some people talk about this. And that's the problem, is that some people are talking about parts and pieces. There's no one that's talking about all of it together. So everyone is teaching, right, their perspective, their very important part and piece of a very, very large puzzle. And for me, I don't know, I'm a much more holistic, systemic thinker. I always have been. And I'm also very practical and pragmatic, right? So after my near-death experience at 10 years old, I came back to life, knowing, being, receiving, perceiving that everything was ultimately energy interconnected. And that, it like launched me on this quest to understand, how do we access those realms, that energy again, right? I knew that like survival, that consciousness survived after death. And I knew that everything was ultimately energy, but I didn't know how to re-access. I was very upset with Scotty that he didn't beam me back up for a very long time. And I was like, why am I stuck down here when like everyone else is asleep and not awake and like so, just like unconscious and not even questioning the meaning of life and why we're here and how it all works, right? There's no battery that are informing us and how we operate and how we move. And so this is my lifelong quest, is to understand the nature of reality, the survival of consciousness after death, like how we operate, how reality gets created, etc. And so after that near-death experience, I studied everything from like the wooest of the woo to the most scientific and, neuroscience-y, like nerdy part of it, and everything in between. Because for me, it was like, I'm not going to sit there. I very quickly realized in the woo stuff that I wasn't just going to like go meditate in the mountains and like go and like hang out and be a Taoist nun. And like that wasn't fulfilling to me. I was like, no, I want to be like I understood that we were energetic beings. And so when I started to understand the energetic nature of things, I was like, okay, cool. But like I'm still, unfortunately, because until Scotty beams me back up, like I'm still a human being here, trapped in this three-dimensional world and reality. And so for me, taking a very practical, pragmatic approach to energy and to make it measurable, right? That's why one of my core philosophies in my business has always been about making energy very measurable, because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So if we can't access the energy that is informing, what it is that we ultimately are experiencing currently in our current reality and what we want to bring into our future reality, it's going to be very difficult to do that. Because if you are wanting to change anything in any area of your life, aka manifest, right? Like, so whether something's not working and you want to remove it, or you want to overcome it, or you want to like just get it out of the way, or you're wanting to bring something into existence, right? Both of them for me are manifestation, because what you are dealing with is ultimately energy, which is why I teach energy intelligence as like a core set of skills and capabilities and competencies, because I believe that it's not just about emotional intelligence, right? Like emotions are one tiny little part and piece of the puzzle. And so for me, energy intelligence and being able to, what I call, access the energetics of what it means to be human, what it means to, right, be an energetic being having this human experience, is where the rubber truly meets the road if we are wanting to stay future-proof ourselves, if we want to stay relevant, we truly want to just create lives that are full of abundance and well-being and vitality and ease and peace and joy and all the things. So today, what I thought I would do with you is really just give you the fundamentals of a few of my different frameworks that I use and talk about repeatedly over and over and over again. Because once you understand these foundational frameworks, then you will understand more how to access the energetics. Because being able to access the energetics is a very tangible process, right? Like, the energetics are the intangible things, right? The energetics are like your thoughts, your words, your values, your beliefs, like even our actions are driven by energy. And it's all energy, right? So the energetics are the mechanics of how this whole thing called life and reality operates and work. So for you to be able to access those energetics is going to give you ultimately, like the more you can master that, is going to build your energy intelligence. And it's important to become more intelligent in the thing that is informing everything else, wouldn't you think? And quantum manifestation mastery is really mastering the process of bringing energy into material form, right? So that's really those are the three terms I use a lot. And then one of the key frameworks that I help you to be able to understand how energy, right, goes from its infinite source state to our seemingly physical three-dimensional reality is what I call the leverage points of change. Because if you want to change something in your physical reality, your seemingly physical three-dimensional reality, right, like where things are seemingly physical, you will need to understand how to leverage the energy and where the highest leverage point of change is to make those associated changes. So if you have been someone along your journey who's done all the things at a behavior level, right? Said your affirmations and visualized and meditated and like doing all like really helpful, seemingly helpful things, but it's still not translating and manifesting, giving you the results that you want in three-dimensional reality. It begs the question, then like it's not habits, it's not behaviors. That's why I did a whole another video of like stop chasing habits. It's not about that. Like, yes, all of those bodies of knowledge and like Atomic Habits is a really important and powerful book and very helpful. But unless you really truly understand, like, again, the mechanics and the leverage that energy and the journey that energy goes on, you're always going to bump your head up against and judge yourself and feel like you're doing something wrong when those actions, those habits, those new routines that you put into place in the morning and in the evening and whatever are not working for you. So I don't want you to waste time doing things, behavior level, that are not actually giving you the leverage to result in and create the changes and manifest whatever it is that you want with ease and speed and consistency. So the very first framework that I take my clients through is what I call the leverage points of change. And it's because if you want leverage, right, we all know that leverage is like where it's at when you want to, if you've got the person that has the highest leverage has essentially the most ability to influence something with ease, right? So the lowest leverage point of change is your environment, your physical, three-dimensional reality that you find yourself in. The first thing to understand about your current external reality and environment is that it's old, it's comprised of old energy that has been intentionalized, directed, maybe consciously, but predominantly unconsciously. So then what do you typically do? You probably go, like, if you don't have enough money in your bank account, you'll go and take actions. You'll go and learn about different new behaviors, put in different routines, right? Say your affirmations, set goals, write them down, go learn new skills to, be hired. That is at the level of behavior. So yes, those behaviors are required because we are human beings. But the question is, when you are not taking a lot of those behaviors that you logically, rationally know you should be taking, the question then becomes, well, why? Why aren't you doing those behaviors, even though you know you should be, even though you know it's the right thing to do, even though you know that it will move the needle? And that then begs the question, well, what's informing your behavior? And that then you might be like, well, Carrie, I might need to go learn the skills. If I don't know how to do something, if I don't know how to code and how to do AI and social media marketing or whatever it is, then maybe I need to go and do a course on it and learn the skills to do it, because that's what's going to inform my behavior. Good argument. And yes, it does. That is one component, one possibility that's going to inform whether you do the behavior. But now what about the behaviors? What about those extra 10 pounds you want to lose? And you know that like literally tearing open a piece of chocolate and, putting it into your mouth is not going to contribute to losing weight. So why are you doing that? Maybe you can argue like, I need to go and learn recipes and learn how to eat healthier meals. And that's why you're scrolling on Instagram and like you're, like saving all the posts on like meal prepping. Okay, cool. So then like, why aren't you still doing the healthy meal prep that you've got all the 1,000 Instagram posts saved about? And now we're like tapping into like the willingness. Like you might know how, might be able to, but you might not be willing to meal prep or to stop eating chocolate or to work late hours, whatever, to get the resulting environment that you want. Okay, so that's the level of capability, right? We've gone through all three forms of capability. If you're skilled in it, you're able to do it, but you're not willing to do it, what does that relate to? Well, that then speaks to the fact that you don't believe that it's important enough. So now we're hovering around the levels of beliefs. And so what informs your beliefs? Another higher leverage point of change, your values. If you value being skinny, but you also value like the taste of food, now we've got a conflict of values. And now that speaks to yet another higher leverage point of change. It's like, well, who's valuing skinny versus, the food aspect of it? And now we're talking about your identity level. And now we start to see that we have multiple identities, because you could be a foodie and you could identify as a vegan and you could identify with someone who is always happy. I am happy with my body. I am, right? And so now you've got all of these very subtle, because anything, the verb to be speaks to the level of identity. Anything after the I am, an I am statement of any kind, is associated to what you identify as. So now we've got all of these different identities that are all at a higher leverage point of change. And even above identity is what I call your soul state, which transcends these identities. And at the soul level, there's even a higher leverage point of change above a soul state, which is the source of energy. And so, right, remember we've got like major source of inspiration that is informing and inspiring everything. And at that level, the highest leverage point, right, energy in its essence, there is no charge. There is no right or wrong, good or bad, negative emotions, positive emotions, negative thoughts, positive thoughts. So from a quantum manifestation mastery point of view, it's mastering the quantum nature of energy. And energy ultimately, when you are aligning your energy, if you're not aware, of how that energy even exists and is informing everything, like boom, like you're never, like that's the first thing. Second thing is if you're not aware of how you are informed by energy, what your thoughts are, beliefs are, identities are, values are, capabilities are, you're never going to understand why you can't take the behaviors, the actions, speak the words that you want to bring into physical form the resulting reality and results that you find yourself desiring. So that is why the leverage points of change is one of the first frameworks I teach people to start to recognize how this resulting environment that we find ourselves in is actually created, manifested. Okay, so that's the first one. Another framework that's really helpful, that's duplicatable and replicatable, is understanding your brain, understanding how we think, right? Because our thoughts, obviously, like are the predominant way that we are informed and animated and inspired by energy. And our brains, we all have a brain, replicatable, duplicatable. Understanding how the brain works, framework. Roger Sperry in the 1980s won a Nobel Prize for his work on split brain research, which ultimately helped us understand the localization of brain function. Each area, each part of your brain has an associated function that it is responsible for. And so split brain research ultimately evolved into the 4-quadrant model of the brain and understanding that it's not just about the 2 hemispheres, it's actually about understanding the localized functionality in each area. So then we split the hemispheres into 2 to get the 4 quadrants, the main essential aspects or functions of each of those quadrants that dictate, like if we're analytical or rational or big picture thinker or detailed thinker. So even the whole myth around like that, you're only creative when you're using the right hemisphere of your brain is such bollocks, because ultimately when we are the most creative, literally, and creative meaning like we can create anything in our lives, not just like Monet and like painting stuff, but truly creativity is available to us when we are accessing all areas of the brain and all the different functionalities that are available to all of us, which is why I love Dr. Kobus Nietling's whole brain thinking profiles and assessments, because now we can measure how you think across multiple contexts. And what is a context? Is just an identity that you operate in. So when it comes to understanding the brain and how it informs how we make decisions, how we relate, how we lead, how we parent, how we do all the things, it's really important, because we can now also see how so much interpersonal conflict can arise from even that, understanding that framework or model, duplicatable, replicatable framework and model of whole brain through the lens of whole brain thinking. Because if I'm, for example, a very R1 thinker, which is the top right quadrant of our brain, which is responsible for the functionalities of like big picture thinking and innovation and evolving things and seeing, like how else things can be done and questioning like the meaning of like, well, why are we doing it this way and not that way? So even word tracks, right, change when you access different areas of your brain and you've got, big neural pathways that are built up there. If we look at like the L2 part of the brain, which is the left hemisphere, but the bottom part, so now we're like literally diagonally opposing the different parts of the brain. If I'm working with someone that's very L2, not R1, and that person is very like detail focused and very sequential in nature and doesn't like to change things, if it's like, if it's not broken, don't fix it type of mentality, because that part of the brain is responsible for sequential, for process, for detail, for like putting things in place, for following the steps sequentially and going from this 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Whereas the R1 is like constantly like, jumping from this to this. And because this idea reminds them of this idea, and then this relates to this, because everything is ultimately interconnected. And that is what that part of the brain, the R1 part of the brain, is responsible for. So this part of the brain is not better than this part of the brain. And this part of the brain is not more important than this part. All the different functionalities of your brain are important. So when you can measure how you are accessing all these different functionalities and how they're personifying you, right, and creating your resulting personality in how you talk and how you dress and how you, approach tasks, how you decide, how you lead, how you parent, all the things, how you lead, how you relate, it makes sense as to like why you like certain people and don't like certain people, why you have conflict with certain people and why you don't have conflict with other people, why you are motivated to do certain things and why you're not unmotivated to do certain things, right? Like it just all becomes so clear when you understand how energy is ultimately personifying, informing, animating, guiding, directing every single thing that you do and say. So that's another duplicatable, replicatable framework. Why is it duplicatable and replicatable? Because we all have a brain. So once you understand how the brain works, you can duplicate and replicate. Oh, okay, so this person that's sitting in front of me right now, you can start to spot behavioral clues in them and say, like when someone's got very little body language, when they, when they're not highly animated, when they have very direct eye contact, they say words like, what is the outcome? What are we here to achieve? What has the performance been so far? What do the numbers say? Has anyone done the analysis? Where's the research to support this? You can hear that that's like, right, like my whole demeanor, my whole animation, my whole vibe, energy has changed because now I'm, right, showing you what that area of the brain, L1, informs, personifies, a human being energetically personifies a human being because those are the functions that human is accessing of their brain. Whereas an R1 person like me, right? Well, not like me, but like I have a very high R1 in general. I'm going to be way more animated. I'm going to be, like jumping concepts. And that's why like I very rarely like script things and I never like read a teleprompter because my brain, like I access the different quadrant of my brain. But when I'm now with a person that I've just described, a very strong preferent L1. So it's not even like they are that way, right? They are just an L1 preferent person. And remember, because we all have a whole brain, we can all access different parts of our brain. So it makes us all accountable. And it makes it, we don't have the excuse of being like, well, that's just who I am. That's just my personality. That's why it was so helpful, like when I was doing lots of team optimization and in corporate, because it takes away the excuse that people have, well, that's just who I am. And like, I'm sorry, I just can't change. Well, no, it's actually not true. You can absolutely change. If you're not a detail-orientated person, right? And this is where we hear the level of identity. I am not a detail-orientated person. That's an identity. And that is informing at a very high leverage point everything that person believes, values, what the capabilities, what they're going to be willing to do, the resulting behaviors and actions that they will take, and the resulting culture that person's going to contribute and or find themselves in. But because of neuroplasticity, you have absolutely the ability to go with conscious awareness and intent, obviously, to go access different areas, go access the detail orientated part of your brain and start to build new neural pathways and networks there. So we all can change. Absolutely 100%. It's just about becoming more conscious of it and knowing like, well, how to change it. If you don't even know that you've identified and attached to not being a detail orientated person, and that's who you now are, identity, but you don't know that like, well, actually, it's just an area of your brain that you just very preferent and identified with, and you can go and visit another quadrant of your brain. So that's why doing the profiles is really helpful, right? And the assessments, because now we can measure, well, and see on paper. I mean, I made my husband do these profiles, guys, before we even got married, when we were engaged, because we are we access such fundamentally different quadrants of our brain. And so you have to go on a little treasure hunt to find like, well, where do you access that part of your brain? Because it's not like, unless it's missing or it's been damaged, unfortunately, you have that area of the brain and those corresponding and associated functionalities available to you. Like just end of story. So it's just about finding them. And if you can measure like where you do it in another context or in another identity of your life, boom, like there it is. Like now let's just map the gap. Okay, so we've gone through how to access the energetics by understanding the leverage points of change. One of the highest leverage points of change being the source of inspiration. And one of the highest sources of inspiration is our brain, right? Which is why I talk a lot about the whole brain model. And so if you want to understand these frameworks and models in a deeper way, I would highly recommend the fulfillment factor training. I'll link it down below because it goes through not just the whole brain thinking model, not just the leverage points of change, but it also goes through human design. As an overview of, because I also believe like from a soul state point of view and from an identity point of view, it also gives another framework of understanding like what drives, right, who we are as a soul and what we've come in to differentiate, because human design is all about the science of differentiation and individuation, right? So it also helps you understand like how you are designed to process energy. And then the Enneagram is another one that I even go through in the fulfillment factor training, because these are the factors that fulfill you and help you fulfill your life and fulfill whatever it is that you're trying to manifest. So it's important to understand these frameworks. It's important to understand yourself through these very replicatable lenses, so that you can work with energy in a much faster way. And this is truly from a quantum manifestation mastery point of view, like these are the techniques. It's not just affirmations and, visualizing. It's really understanding like who you are through these lenses, so that you can become aware of like what your specific unique way of manifesting is, because it might be very different to my way of manifesting, right? Like even just my way of thinking might be very different to your way of thinking in a leadership capacity or a relationship capacity or a parenting capacity. So for you to understand yourself in all of these different identities, in all these different contexts of your life, it's not a technique. Like quantum manifestation mastery is not about teaching you a technique. It's about teaching you frameworks. It's about teaching you like the very mechanics of how manifestation occurs, so that you can master it. So if you are enjoying this content, please let me know and let the algorithm know by liking and subscribing and hitting the notification bell. And also don't forget to share this with other people that you think would really resonate with my content, because I also believe that when we have more like-minded people come together, we could truly manifest a much better experience than what we're collectively experiencing right now. So thanks so much for watching and sharing and liking, and I'll see you in the next one. So this is why it's really helpful when you have these conflicting identities and you start to become aware of these conflicts, these value conflicts, these identity conflicts. It's like, okay, how am I operating in these different identities, in these different contexts, right? So a leadership is one context, for example. You as a parent is another context. And you as a leader, you as a parent could potentially have very conflicting values and associated ways of, and preferences and ways of being. So when you can now measure how you lead and what different areas of the brain you access as a leader versus the different areas of the brain you access as a parent, it becomes so enlightening.